Good evening all, and welcome. It has often been believed that there are those out there who have the power to perceive those who have passed, those who claim to have a sixth sense. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. About 6 years ago, I was dating a girl who was extremely spiritual. It completely opened my eyes to different aspects of life and death. I always left my cell phone next to the bed, in case anyone ever needed me in the middle of the night. No one ever called me past 2 a.m. unless something bad happened. Now I have bad sleep insomnia, sometimes worse than others, but this night I was able to fall asleep at a normal time, roughly 10 p.m., and my significant other was already fast asleep. I had woken up at 3 a.m. on the dot to my cell phone ringing. In a daze of sleep, I quickly pick up the phone, not looking at the number, and I hear an echoing voice that sounded underwater repeating, "Please help me. Get my father, please." Creepy as that is, here's the kicker. It was my significant other's voice on the phone. Now, that caught my attention and woke me right up. I'm in bed, looking down at her and hearing this thing. "Please get my father, I need help." Take a step back. Hearing this thing on the phone made my stomach drop. It's like I knew she was passing away. It completely freaked me out. I moved my leg and realized that there's a body next to me, and obviously it's her, and I start violently shaking her, asking if she's here next to me. The person or this thing on the phone is still begging me for help, and I'm shaking my significant other, the one who's right next to me. The plea for help for her father, once again, is drowned by the water sound and the echoed voice. At this point, her eyes open wide, and she realizes it's her own voice, and we both look at the number. It's just a bunch of ones. And I say her name over the phone asking, "How can I help?" And we both watch whatever it is hang up the phone and disconnect. The number was untraceable by the phone company and didn't even show up in the records of my cell. This is one of the creepiest things that's happened in my life. I'm looking up similar things I can find, but she was very much alive and next to me. Could this have been a call from another dimension? We, to this day, have zero explanation, and I can never shake the feeling that she was leaving this world from the other side of the phone, passing on, begging me for help. When I was around 8, my 32-year-old aunt found out that her cancer had returned and was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer that had spread to her stomach, lungs, and spine. At the time, I wasn't familiar with cancer, just knew that it was a bad disease. My family told us she had cancer, but did not elaborate any further. The day she received her diagnosis, all of the adults, my gammy, my papa, 5 aunts and uncles and my mum, dropped myself and about 5 or 6 of my cousins off at another relative's house to keep an eye on us. We were all young, not knowing what was really going on, but we all felt like something big was going to happen. I've always been an anxious and extremely empathetic person. For a while I could guess what people were thinking. I knew stuff that there was no way I could know. The adults returned and were visibly upset. They told us it's not good, but that we were going to fight it and the doctors are going to try everything they can. Fast forward a few months. Me and my cousin are sleeping over at my aunt's, and she got me alone and asks me something along the lines of, "How much longer do you think I have? When do you think I'm going to die?" She had a son that was around 3 at the time, and in my gut I knew she didn't have long. I thought I would be nice and give her hope, so I tell her, "When Mac is about 7, She immediately bursts into tears and screams, Thanks a lot." That really disturbed me and kind of broke something in me. I didn't know what to do or say. I thought I was being good and giving her time. After that, I tiptoed around her and didn't really engage with her anymore. She ended up passing 4 months later. My cousin and I slept over at my Grammy's and slept in her room with the light on before my aunt's burial. The morning of, I'm waking up, but don't actually want to get out of bed yet, so I'm just laying on the little bed that's set perpendicularly at the foot of Gammy's, with my cousin wiping my eye boogers away, trying to move too much so that I don't wake my cousin and annoy her. My eyes are closed, but I'm definitely awake. I start to blink, my eyes clear of them, and I can see my now deceased aunt walk into the room. She's wearing the bright red outfit with a little Christmas teddy bear jingle necklace that one of the kids gave her that we were going to bury her in. I can hear it make a jingle, but muffled because it's up against her clothes, almost like she was trying for it to be quiet as possible. I'm squinting at her, and I'm in disbelief. I have no reaction or emotion, I'm just in shock. She walks over to Gammy, who's still sleeping, and leans over for a bit, turns around and walks out the room. As she passes by me, I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. When she got in the hallway, the jingling got louder and more pronounced, like she didn't care if it did make a noise. I tried telling people about it, but of course no one believed me. Just a little kid trying to be cute, saying she saw her aunt, blah blah blah. My second experience. I was driving with Gammy, her niece and my cousin, out to a property that Gamley's family owned, and her niece starts talking about the witches in the family. Apparently, it's a generational thing, and each generation passes it personally on to the next. Gammy acted like she didn't know anything about it. So I've got witchy blood? My dreams. I've heard from a few people and even read online in dream dictionaries that dreaming of fish means someone's going to be pregnant. I dreamt that a family member or close friend and I are on the beach, or on a boat, or in a canal. There's a huge fish in the water, and initially we're both freaked out, but then the friend or family member will jump in the water with the fish. A few months later, I'd forgotten about the dream, and I find out that they're pregnant. I had a dream that my aunt was breastfeeding her son. Googled it, and it could mean illness. Turns out she has some rare blood disease. Didn't know she was ill. One time in high school, I dreamt that me and one of my friends were going to meet up with someone to buy some weed, but my friend lost her money. The next day I meet up with my friend in my dream and another mutual friend. The mutual friend starts with, "Last night me and her were going to meet up with, thingy," and I cut her off and tell them about my dream. Get the requisite. That's so weird. A lot of times I'll dream of random scenarios or scenes, and a few days later these things will play out. The scariest dreams for me though, if I have premonitions, are the dreams where my daughters and I are in a horrible plane or boat accident and my youngest drowns. Always a plane or on a boat, and it's always my youngest. Cue anxiety-induced paranoia. Well, my friends, if you've made it this far, I salute you. Thankfully, none of the bad things have happened to my immediate family just yet, unless they're mentioned here. Let's hope my dreams are wrong. I wasn't there at the time this happened, but my grandfather told me about this, and as far as I know, he's never told a lie in his life, so I wasn't too skeptical. That being said, I don't have any evidence except the word of the witness. My grandma tragically passed away from a colon infection about 2 to 3 weeks ago at the time of sharing this, June 1st, 2019. It was one of the most depressing times for our family, considering that my grandmother was one of, if not the nicest person in the world. Something kind of weird happened a few days after the funeral though. My oldest uncle has a dog. When my uncle brought the dog over to my grandfather's house, the dog started acting super strange, Literally, the first thing the dog did was go straight to my grandmother's old room and start barking at nothing. After my uncle got him out of the room and to stop barking, the dog went over to the chair in the family room my grandmother always used. He hopped onto the chair and hopped off, then proceeded to sit in front of the chair and stare at it. This wouldn't seem too weird at first glance until you realize that is exactly what the dog would do if someone was sitting in a chair he hopped on. No one was in the chair as far as we could see. I swear dogs have a sixth sense for seeing the past. It's incredible. At least we know that my grandma is still around in a way. All of my immediate family, that is, blood related to me, have a bit of a paranormal edge. Like, we're nothing amazing that people will be wowed by, but we can all do something a smidge out of the ordinary. My mother has what I call death knell dreams. She dreams of people when they're about to pass away, maybe a few hours before, and if she's within physical distance, she tries to go to them so that they don't pass alone. My older sister gets precognitive messages via radio, which funnily enough is a sign of schizophrenia, but she's never been wrong, so we've never been worried. My older brother can see spirits, and really anything non-physical. We come from a background where this ability is almost expected of him, so we don't pay it much mind. Then there's me, a mishmash of weirdness. Sometimes I can see things, sometimes I hear things, and sometimes I just know there's something there. I've always been able to do it, but it's pretty inconsistent, and I usually chalk it up to the fact I don't necessarily want to notice these things. So on to the most memorable experiences I've had, and the one that leads me to my question. When I was a freshman in college, my family got a Netflix subscription. I would be staying up late in the living room doing homework and listening to shows in the background, while everyone else is asleep. One of the first shows I binged was Medium. It basically is a show about an Arizona housewife who sees spirits and solves their crimes. The show is pretty average, but it makes her abilities seem really amazing in a nice and mundane sort of way. After binge watching 5 episodes, I thought, for the first time in my life and without fear, maybe it wouldn't be so bad seeing the spirits. It might actually be pretty cool. Just that. Just a thought in passing. Not 5 minutes later, I turned from where I was sitting on the couch, thanks to what I can only assume was my sixth sense, and I saw a large glowing light rush down the hallway and vanish through the wall. No, it wasn't even in the corner of my eye. It was the reflection of the light, because how even? I wasn't even close to any windows, because then it may have been a passing car. It was 8 feet in front of me, and travelled in the trajectory in front of my face. I'm a scaredy cat, guys, and when I say I screamed, I take it back. I mean I screamed it loud, and I never backtracked so hard in my life. I've seen a few things since, but nothing so aggressive or blatant as that night. The one factor that I think was different was that I wasn't afraid that night. I was perfectly comfortable and chilled. All my other experiences have been nerve-wracking experiences, and they've all been far less alarming. So here's my question. Do you think seeing spirits is a choice? If we just weren't scared and a bit more open, do you think all of us would be able to perceive the paranormal? Or do you think there is a circumstance unique to me and my family? Hope to hear from you guys soon. My boyfriend and I have lived in this house for over 2 years. A few weird things have happened that have made us go, but nothing scary or definitely paranormal. The most unexplainable event happened to him 2 nights ago. We have a back patio/pool deck, which is a step down from a sliding glass door into the kitchen. He was outside about midnight, smoking and reading on his phone. He was sitting in a chair with his back to the house, and the sliding glass door slightly behind and about 2 feet from the left of his left shoulder. All is quiet when he hears a loud thump on the outside of the glass door, immediately followed by a strange crinkling noise. He described it as if someone, with a plastic grocery bag full of stuff in their hand, walked into the door nearest us that was closed. He also said it definitely sounded like the thump came from the outside versus something bumping into it from the inside. Everyone was asleep inside anyway. It was loud enough to startle him, so he jumped up and expected to see a bird or something on the ground which had flown into the door. He didn't see anything of the sort and started looking around the patio trying to locate what could have hit the door. He also messed with various random things on the patio, trying to replicate the sounds since it travels in weird ways sometimes. After about 10 minutes of trying to figure it out, he was at a loss, so he sits back down for another cigarette and goes back to resume whatever it was he was doing on his phone. After 10 more minutes, he suddenly feels the sensation of someone blowing on the back of his neck and every hair on his body standing up. He said it was not forceful, but not light, very precise in one place on the neck and ice cold. It being 75 degrees outside and nothing behind him but the house, he understandably noped the hell out inside. He locked the door and turned on the backyard lights. There was one more weird thing. The next morning he went out for a smoke and saw a folded up dollar bill which had previously been on a table on the other side of the pool, sitting on a flower planter that hangs from the security fence, separating the patio from the pool. It wasn't in the planter, it was on the edge and leaning against the fence. I know that doesn't make much sense without seeing it, but trust me, it was in a weird spot. After he told me this story, we talked about it for a while, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. He agreed that it sounded very strange. It's possible that he just couldn't see whatever hit the door, and that some critter or some bird or squirrel could have moved the dollar bill from the table by the pool to the planter. He has absolutely no explanation for the breath on his neck though. He and I were sitting out there last night as he told me what he experienced, and our dog would not stop staring at the backyard and growling. She spends a lot of time out there with us and has never acted this way before. The funny thing is he's not even interested in the paranormal, even though he's told me a couple of stories from his past that are very spooky. He shrugs it off as he's a very practical and logical man. He teases me when I get spooked by something and rolls his eyes when I tell him stories that I've read on subreddits. I think it's possible he has some sort of sixth sense though. He had an experience as a child that sounds terrifying, and he has experienced the majority of the odd occurrences in our home. That being said, hopefully the new backyard ghost continues hanging out with him and leaves me and the kids alone. When I was 12, we lived in a house in the middle of nowhere, Montana. On the outside, it looked like your typical haunted house. Canting a bit to one side, dark woods, 2 stories with a round attic window that occasionally reflected the light, so it looked like a face was looking out at you. There were holes in the walls and doors where the previous tenants had kicked and punched them during his many bouts of spousal abuse. The atmosphere in that house was one of lingering rage and darkness. I hated being alone in any of the rooms. It just felt dangerous, like the house itself was tainted with some unseen darkness. The weirdest thing that happened was there was one night a few months after we moved in. Our dogs all started growling and barking at a little cubby space off the living room that had been turned into a computer space. They stood at the edge of the area and wouldn't go in, and barked with their fur all standing up. These were smart dogs, and they had only ever reacted this way to mountain lions. Until we moved out, they treated that space as if it was actively dangerous to us. Whenever my other brothers were in the living room, the dogs would always put themselves between us and that spot while growling as if to warn us, whatever made its home there not to try anything. I was so glad when we moved. There were other haunted houses we lived in, but that was the one that creeped me out the most. I had 2 cats, Neil and Ed, since 2008. Neil died last year. Ed is now 13. Neil only ever hissed once in his life, the day I brought my newborn son home from the hospital. The cats came into the room on the 2nd floor and were inspecting my son. There was a creak in the floorboards from the hallway. No one was there, and Neil jumped, turned around and hissed, then started growling at the bedroom door. For the entire 11 years of Neil's life, he has never hissed or growled at any other time, from what my family has witnessed at least. There's been many other occasions of floorboards creaking and cats acting like morons, but today Ed's behavior is making me very curious. My cats have always lived on the 2nd floor. Cat beds, food, water, litter droppings are all on the 2nd floor. Ed is 13 now, and spends most of the day napping in the cat bed, and will sometimes follow me in the kitchen or greet us at the front door when we return home, but never hangs out downstairs. This morning I went downstairs and I see Ed sitting like a cat loaf in front of the couch, not lounging or sleeping, just sitting. This seems really weird. Ed never goes into that room unless following a human, and it's only me and the cat that are home. I don't really pay any attention as I'm eating my breakfast, and I hear some floorboards creaking from the 2nd floor. I hear this creaking a lot and usually ignore it, but this time with Ed seeming off, I decide to inspect and of course find nothing. But now the interesting part. Ed won't come back upstairs. I'm up here alone. No one else is home. The cat spends his whole life on the 2nd floor and is refusing to move from his position downstairs and has been there for hours. I call him, shake the treat bag, and he doesn't move. For what it's worth, my mother and I have both believed for years this house is haunted by a benevolent spirit. There have been many other experiences in this house that may have suggested as such, and only some of them involve cats. Maybe it is related. I'm going to start off by prefacing that over these last few months I lost 2 family members, one being my grandpa and another being my family's 7-month kitten to FIP. After the kitten's departure, my sister decided to adopt another from the shelter. She was a sweet girl, and we'd had her for a month and a half until today. Today I get home from school as I'm the first to arrive, and the way my room is placed is that I'm at the end of the hall, so I can see into my parents' bedroom. I had a friend over at this time, so we were just hanging out with my door open. I have another cat that's 1.5 years old and they usually just play together. So when I heard meows from the other room, I wasn't alarmed. However, when I looked, I see a light was suddenly on in my parents' bedroom. I slightly panicked, since I know I couldn't have someone over. So I immediately went to check on the source. All I saw was the lamp on my parents' headboard, and my older cat sitting by the bed. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just her meowing, and maybe the light just wasn't turned off all the way, although it's the type that twists on and off. I turned the light off and bring my older cat to my room. I heard nothing else from my parents' bedroom. My friend left shortly after, and after a few minutes my mum came home. She's yelling at me saying that something happened. So I rush over to her, and I hear the kitten crying for help under the bed. So I grab her, and she's foaming from the mouth. I've never been in a situation like this, so my first response was that she's choking. I call the vet in a frenzy and they tell me to bring her over. I later found out that she was seizing, but she passed in my arms when I was halfway to the vet. After we arrive back home, I tell my mum the story about how I thought she was home earlier and the light being on. She looks a bit confused and questioned about which light it was. I explained it was the light on her side of the headboard, and she stares at me blankly. That light's been dead for months. I'm now sharing this with you all, questioning my belief in the afterlife. Never in my life have I been given a warning sign. If I would have known to check under the bed, I would have found her. But at that point, I don't think there was anything that could have been done to reverse the outcome. I just got a puppy. I've had him for nearly 6 months now, but he's a bit odd. Ever since he was a puppy, he would get very suspicious at seemingly nothing, barking at corners of the room. It would be common to see him look into a corner and growl at it, then bark and run to the door as if he'd just chased someone out. It's cute but kind of creepy, and he would always do it. Walk into a room, head would snap and look at something, and would just growl the way a dog growls when he spots a cat or strange person. 2 recent examples I'd like to share. I was lying in bed the other morning. Next to my bed is a back door that leads to my backyard. I could hear my dog playing outside, but I could also hear a quiet girl's voice talking to the dog. I thought no big deal, perhaps it's my mum or my sister. But I peeked out to look at him, and he was just playing by himself. And then he stopped pretty abruptly and looked quite confused, and then just walked off to lay down. There have been other times where I have watched him in the yard, and he looks like he's playing with an imaginary friend. But that in itself is nothing unusual for a pup. Then last night he came into my room through the door that goes through the living room, while I was laying on my bed reading, and his attention instantly snaps towards the other door. The door was shut, but he started off as a low growl, then loudly snarling and barking very viciously. I'd never seen him sound like that before. He had his hackles raised and was baring his teeth, pacing back and forth in my room, watching the door like a hawk, not taking his eyes off it. I was trying to calm him down and call him over, but he was so focused he wouldn't listen. He was making so much noise, my dad came down to see what was happening, and he tried to coax him over, but my dog was totally going mad at the door. After a minute or so of my dog going off, I got up and opened the door. He ran straight to the threshold of the door, barked a few times while looking out into the yard, then it died into a growl, and then tapered off, and he settled down. I've never seen him get like that before. I've seen him bark and growl before. I've seen him act strange with weird dogs, but when they get up and bark and growl to stare each other off, but this was more intense. What do you guys think? As far back as I can remember, I have had paranormal experiences. I like telling some of these when people are telling ghost stories, but I've never shared them until now. My mom was always into the paranormal and witchcraft. My dad told me there were times when she would be doing something and take off running out the house and screaming for everyone to leave. Who knows what she was doing? So I do believe my mother is the biggest reason I have experienced these things during my life. The first experience I had was when I was 3. Of course I don't remember it, but there were several family members present that day, and they have all told me the story. My cousin, my sister, mom, dad and I were playing hide and seek. My cousin and sister, both older. It was a small house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a living room. No attic nor basement. There weren't many places to hide. I don't know who was doing the seeking, but I was hiding. I was told that everyone was found except me. Everyone was looking for me behind furniture, in cabinets and in all the closets, under the beds, outside, and they couldn't find me, but they could hear me. I don't remember right off what they said, but they said they kept hearing me. They would go look to where they thought my voice was coming from and I wouldn't be there. About an hour, more or less, I came out from behind an armchair that sat catty-corner in a corner. My dad said he looked behind that chair at least 10 times and I wasn't there. The first experience I do remember was when I was 5. My grandfather had recently passed away. My sister and I shared a room. We had bunk beds. She was on top, and our beds faced the door. One night, we saw our grandfather in a white suit sitting in our bedroom door. We started whispering back and forth to each other about what we were seeing. He turned his head and looked back at us, put a finger up to his lips and shushed us. Then one night, we saw a hand reach into our door like it was feeling for the light switch. My sister threw something at it, and it jerked away. In 3rd grade, we lived in a 3-bedroom rental property. One of the bedrooms was painted a deep blue color. I don't know why, but we didn't use this bathroom for a long time. I guess it was because we were told a teenage boy ended his life in there. Me and my sister shared the bedroom right beside this room. We always thought we would hear knocks and loud bangs coming from there. My sister got tired of sharing a room with me and basically kicked me out, and I had to move into the blue room. My little cousin, who was around too, was staying with us and he slept with me. One night the bed started shaking, and it began banging, always in 3s. My cousin woke up screaming, saying there was a monster shaking the bed. I got him up and took him to my room and went back to sleep. I had a spirit dog when I was in 6th grade. He was a Scottish terrier that we named Scotty. I know, creative, right? He always slept with me. He got a really horrible skin infection, and I think my parents had to put him down. After he passed, I would be laying in bed and I would hear his little nails clacking on the tile floor and his tag clanking as he ran down the hallway to my room. Then I would feel him jump on the bed and walk up and lay next to me. It made me sad. I missed that little pup. And sadly, the sensations eventually stopped. I guess he moved on. We moved a lot, so I spent my 7th and half my 8th grade year living on the side of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. Our little town was literally a 1-stoplight town. My mum always told me not to go into the woods behind the house, because there was a cult that did dark rituals there. But she would make me go out into the pitch dark to dump scraps. She also said there was a portal in the front yard, and that we have trolls or goblins that came at night. Her friends would come over and they would play the Ouija board and stuff. That place was creepy as hell. My sister ran away from home to live with her boyfriend, and my parents would leave me at home after dark. I always felt like something was watching me. One night I was sitting on the couch watching TV. I was home alone and I heard my name being called. I could see down the hallway from where I was sitting, which happened to be where the voice was coming from. I turned to look and there was this huge white mist in the hallway. In the middle of my 8th grade year, we finally bought a house. I wouldn't have to move anymore, or so I thought. Things picked up a lot in this house. I heard my name all the time. I kept an open Bible on my dresser, and it would always be closed when I went back to the room. Things would be moved around or missing. I thought I saw an elf or something standing in the doorway at night. I would also feel cold spots and all the usual stuff. The creepiest thing to happen here, though, was one day in the middle of the day we heard this loud banging on the front door. It was me and my parents home at the time. I was in my room, Mom in hers, and stepdad in the living room watching TV. The banging was so loud. My mum ran out of her room screaming for no one to open the door, because if you open the door, you will let it in. I came out my room curious to see what was going on. My stepdad muted the TV and yelled, "Who is it?" to receive no answer, of course. Then this thing started running back and forth on the porch, and it was loud. It sounded like it was running on all fours, but it sounded like a freight train on the porch. It shook the house while it ran. It would come back to the door and beat on the door some more and then run back and forth. This went on for a few moments. My mum was scared to death. My stepdad was getting pissed, thinking it was one of my friends messing with us. He gets up and throws the door open, cussing. When the door opened, a strong wind blew through the house and the walls looked like they were breathing. My mum was like, "Oh my God, you let it in." They started arguing over it, so I went back to my room. As a teenager, I didn't care. I was used to all this by now. She had her friends come over to help take care of it. We eventually lost the house and moved again, this time to an older home. I liked this home, but you could really feel the energy here. The atmosphere felt thick. By this time, my parents were leaving me home alone a lot, especially in the middle of the night. I didn't experience a whole lot here, except you could tell the dog was seeing stuff and the thermostat always moved. The dog didn't have much to do with me except when it saw something. Then it would jump in my lap and shake, staring at the ceiling. I moved out, got my own place, and everyone came to my place to hang out and party. I was 16, so my friends reveled in the freedom of hanging out with me. One night, I had some friends over and we were watching the Amityville Horror. It was storming out, so it was fairly creepy. One of my friends told me to come look in the bathroom, so me and the other girl go look, and there's a black figure standing at the doorway. It was very large, manly looking, couldn't make out the features though. There was a bright light shining from behind him. It scared the crap out of all of us, and we all slept in the living room that night. For 2 weeks after that at least. Random stuff would happen like a clock radio playing without being plugged in. I called my mom and she said she'd take care of it, and after that, nothing else happened. Fast forward, we moved a few more times, went through the typical seeing shadows and such, hearing children's laughter outside my window, but there were no kids around and stuff like that. I got married and moved into my husband's place. He told me stories saying his place was built on an Indian burial ground and that you could see shadows moving outside at night. I never saw anything. We moved from there to a 2-story place. We had twin toddlers now, and he said that once some of their bouncy balls came bouncing down the stairs. He had a friend over playing video games and he confirmed the story. The balls were at the bottom of the stairs. Their room was besides the stairs, so the balls would have to come out of their room and go around the railing to get to the stairs. The twins started playing with an imaginary friend, setting an extra place at tea and such, giggling and jabbering at thin air. I would stay up late to enjoy some peace and quiet, as this was the only time I got to myself. The toys would start going off and the dolls would speak. This one doll would say, "I love you, Mummy," even though that wasn't one of its phrases. One day, I was washing dishes and looking out the window. I saw a very large white orb float across the yard, come up on the porch and come through the front door. I looked towards the front door and there was a little girl standing there. But then, she went away. She followed us when we had to move in with my mum. She started becoming more visible then. One night the girls were in bed and we were all in the living room. My mum and husband said they saw a little girl in PJs holding a teddy bear come to the doorway and peek out. Another day I was sitting at the table and my mum was washing dishes. I saw what I thought was one of my girls running out of the laundry room into my mum's bedroom closet. I got up and ran after her because my mum would get annoyed if they went into her room. She heard me call after her and tell me to get out of Nana's room. She came in after me, and we both went into the closet. I turned on the light, and there was no one in there. We both just stood there for a moment because I swore I saw one of the girls run in there. Another evening I was giving the girls a bath, and my husband was at the fire department having a meeting. I thought I saw him walk by the bathroom in our bedroom. I got up to ask him why he was home so early, but there was no one there. A young guy owned that place before my parents, and he ended his life in the shed. I assumed it was him. Now, my girls are 19, and I haven't had anything spooky happen in several years. The girls swear they see shadows in their bedroom and hear voices in mine, but I haven't. In fact, one of the girls just came out of her room saying that her fan randomly turned off by itself. There was a strange cat locked in my basement once, and there are no vents or windows down there, and no one has been down there in a while. Weird things happen here, but not enough to say this place is haunted. Sometime in my junior year of high school, my dad had to go on a 2-week business trip. So my friend Miranda decided that it would be cool if I could stay with her until my dad got back. I know I could look after myself, but it was an opportunity to have a 2-week-long sleepover, so I happily took the offer. At the time, my friend's family was stationed on Fort Meade in Maryland. I stayed in her brother's room. Her brother had moved out about a year before, so at first it was really comfortable, and I enjoyed having a room in my friend's house. I felt like I was part of their family, but as the nights went on, I would say on the third night, things began to get weird. I remember I would wake up around 3 a.m. or sometimes 1 a.m. in the morning, every time I was there in that room. I found it weird because I usually woke up at 5 a.m., so I didn't miss my 6 a.m. alarm for school. So waking up at 1 or 3 a.m. didn't make sense to me because I never woke up at those times even today. My attention, however, was always focused on one corner of the room where her brother's desk was. There was a chair behind his desk, and I always felt like something was there. I would also hear scratching in the walls, sort of like a squirrel or something was jittering around. I would just try my best to fall back asleep and ignore the scratching noises. I told Miranda's mum about the scratching noises, but she told me it was most likely just a squirrel, like I had thought, but I'm pretty sure squirrels aren't up that early. Plus it happened almost every night, so even though sleeping in that room was uncomfortable, eventually I got used to it. Until the energy in that room got worse maybe after the 6th day. I felt extreme feelings of hate and violence. It really made me feel uncomfortable, and I honestly felt like somebody was in the room with me and wanted to hurt me. It was so bad that I would get really uncomfortable changing my clothes in that room because it literally felt like a man was watching me. Sometimes I would change in the bathroom. In my head, something was telling me that it was a male presence, and it felt like it was a soldier that was middle-aged. I never saw anything, but I always felt like the energy of the presence was so strong, and that's really unlike me. I always felt like he was watching me with malicious intent. I felt like I was going to be attacked continually, but anywhere else in the house I felt normal and happy. I told Miranda about the experience because she could feel that I was afraid of that room. She told me that sometimes her dog Bubbles would come inside the room and just bark at nothing. Once she did it for 10 minutes, and then she just walked out like nothing had happened. So Miranda and I were discussing this inside her brother's room, and out of the blue comes her dog Bubbles and starts freaking out and barking at Miranda. Bubbles isn't a violent dog, she's small and cute, a miniature pinscher, and she never acts like that, especially towards Miranda. We look at each other in surprise, and after 10 seconds of her barking, Bubble flinches and cowers towards me. I continued to stay in that room until I left to go back. Her little sister, Jenny, would talk about things she had experienced in that house, and one of her experiences was waking up one night and seeing someone in the corner of her room. It was tall and looked transparent but still had color. She said it looked like an old-era soldier with a blue cap and a blue uniform, and he was just staring at her. He vanished shortly after, and she froze. It really made me think that there was something in her house, a soldier that was full of hate and violence. I hated her brother's room after that, and every time I would pass it I would feel angry and violated. They no longer live there, but the memory will stay with me forever. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Well, you guys voted for 6 Sense stories, so I hoped you liked them. If you did, please be sure to let me know. You know how. The info is down below. Huge thank you as always to my wonderful patrons and members. If you want some exclusive perks for signing up, feel free to check out either ones. You know, it's pretty cool. Get some fancy perks. And if you become a member of the channel by pressing the join button, you get a little logo next to your name, as well as some fancy other perks that you can read about. Alright then guys, I think that's enough for now. It's time for me to sign off. I'll see you tomorrow. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.